Greg Ehrenberg here with Dr. Adam Scherer. Hope you guys all had a good weekend. We're back with another edition of the Injury Report, sponsored by Yahoo. We're going to be going over some of the most important injuries of the day. Do us a favor, like this video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. Also, this is a pretty big basketball slate. It looks like there's going to be a lot of injury news involved. If anything happens that changes after we record this video, leave us a comment below. Ask me if you have any questions about anything regarding injuries, and I'm going to hop back in and answer those later. So leave us a comment. Anything that happens later on the day with injury reports, I'm going to be answering those questions. Until then, Adam, let's talk about tonight's games. And we already have a handful of guys that are on the injury report, some that are out, some that are questionable, some doubtful guys. But I want to start by asking you about the Raptors. We've got OG Anunoby, Precious Achiuwa, Khem Birch. All of them are out today. With that in mind, do you think this is going to be another slate to go to Chris Boucher?
Yeah, it looks that way. We'll find out more when we get Toronto's starting lineup. But in this matchup against a Sacramento team that started Alex Len and Marvin Bagley in their last game, I don't really see any reason to think that Toronto's not going to go with a front court of Boucher and Siakam, especially because that's what they did the last couple of games. They won their last game against the Knicks when they did that. So it's not like there's any real reason to think that they're going to make some massive change and go back to a smaller lineup here. So as long as Boucher is in the starting lineup, I think he clearly looks like the biggest beneficiary again. He's averaged a little over a fantasy point per minute this year. He played about 23 minutes through 3 quarters in his first start, didn't play in the fourth. Last game, he did play in the fourth, played 27 minutes. He's just still underpriced for his role, assuming he takes Achiuwa's spot in the starting lineup.
Yeah, Nick Nurse typically doesn't like Chris Boucher all that much, and his minutes become a little concerning. If he starts, way less of a concern, and he started the last couple of games. The next injury situation, the Miami Heat. We've got Jimmy Butler out, and Caleb Martin, who was poised to be a chalk play the other day, and then he just gets ruled out like 15 minutes before lock, and the entire slate changes. Any content we did that day totally became irrelevant because Caleb Martin was ruled out shortly before lock. So now with no Caleb Martin, no Jimmy Butler, who fills the minutes on the wing for Miami?
Yeah, it looks like it's going to be Gabe Vincent. That was a pretty safe assumption the other day, I think. And then he played 30.8 minutes. He's relatively inexpensive. He's not the best fantasy producer, but there's plenty of minutes available here. There are plenty of opportunities available as well. Not an overly appealing spot. Miami only has about a 101 implied total right now. Cleveland is a solid team defensively, but most of the value on this slate, at least as of right now, is in the front court. So having a cheap guy like Gabe Vincent as a value option in the backcourt that can, allow you to pay up for some guys like Giannis or Porzingis in the front court if you want to, I think is pretty valuable.
Yeah, and another team that could potentially have value in the front court and actually on the other side of the Toronto Raptors game, so a game that could make some sense for a game stack. There's no Richaun Holmes for the Kings, and I don't know what this team is doing with their starting lineup. Terrence Davis had been one of their better players, and then all of a sudden, Terrence Davis just gets removed from the starting lineup last game. Marvin Bagley starts. Terrence Davis still played fairly well off the bench. But do you think we're going to see another Marvin Bagley start? Because he could be an unavoidable piece of value if that's the case.
Yeah, I mean, that's my assumption since they did it last game. And not only did Davis come off the bench, he barely played. He ended up playing 18 minutes in the game, but that was a game where Sacramento was getting destroyed by the Cavs. The second unit came in, they went on a run, they stayed in to close out the game. Davis only played about 6 minutes in the first half, and he didn't even sub in until about 3 minutes into the second quarter. So really, really weird rotation, that Davis would basically just be close to removed with the way he's been playing. But I don't think we really have much to go on at this point other than Bagley started the last game, and it seems likely that he'll start again here. The last game was against a big Cleveland front court that has Mobley and Allen, so maybe that had something to do with it. But Toronto probably is going Boucher and Siakam, we assume. So it seems like it's a spot where you could certainly see the Kings go right back to Bagley. And if they do, then it's about as safe as it can get, I guess, to assume that Bagley's going to play at least mid-20s.
Yeah, be on the lookout for sure for the Kings starting lineup. More information we'll have on that later. We do the deeper dive, NBA Live before lock. We should know the Kings starting lineup later in the day. Also, something you guys should be on the look for, Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, the sponsor of the NBA Injury Report that we're doing here. If you guys want a really good deal, head on down to the description box below. If you're new to Yahoo Daily Fantasy Sports, head on over to Yahoo, make a deposit, enter a contest, and you get 1 free month of Awesemo Plus Platinum. It's a really good way to get access to all of the tools that you need to win money at DFS, and you do it for cheap. Just make a deposit on Yahoo, sign up, play, and over on Awesemo, we have all the tools you need, not just for Yahoo, but also for DraftKings and FanDuel to help you make some winning lineups. All right. I nailed the transition that time. Last time I messed it up and just the StreamYard logo was up and everybody thought that I was trolling Eric with ducks on the screen. Not the case. I'm just trying to figure out how to produce on the fly while I do these. I've got the right banner up now. But more injury news here. The Memphis Grizzlies. Jaren Jackson Jr. questionable to play. Steven Adams doubtful. What does this mean for the Memphis Grizzlies front court?
A lot of potential minutes to go around. We had Jackson out last game, and you got the start for Kyle Anderson. If he were to sit, I expect that Anderson slides back into the starting lineup. He is more expensive than he was the other night, but he would still look reasonable. And it's also a situation where if you take out Jaren Jackson, Jackson has about a 30% usage rate without John Morant this year. You would see even more Dylan Brooks scoring opportunities. You would see a bump in usage for Desmond Bane. So if Jackson's out, it opens up quite a bit. And then as far as Steven Adams goes, most likely you get Xavier Tillman starting at center. That's not set in stone. That could be a number of guys, but my assumption is that you get Tillman sliding into the starting lineup. He's about a 0.9 fantasy point per minute guy going back to last season. He's close to minimum salary. So if he does start in place of Adams, I think it's reasonable to expect he plays mid-20s in minutes, assuming he doesn't get in massive foul trouble right out of the gate against Joel Embiid. But at a very cheap price tag, the only real concern is the opportunity cost at the center position.
Yeah, another team in the Memphis Grizzlies just decimated by injuries. A ton of players out for them. It's been something that's really killing teams for a number of reasons around the NBA today. The Grizzlies, one of the more shorthanded teams. Now, another team that's overall not necessarily shorthanded in the same way, but Paul George is doubtful to play for the Clippers. He's missed the last couple of games, and he's played such a big role for this team that it creates a massive void. But is there any one individual player that you think benefits from Paul George being out for the Clippers, or is it more of a team effort?
I think it's more of a team effort. You don't necessarily have one guy stepping up to fill the void, but Reggie Jackson has done his best this year. He has a 31% usage rate without George on the floor. We know that he plays a lot of minutes. He only played about 32 minutes last game, but for the season, his average is even higher than that. So it wouldn't be surprising to see more run here. But then you also get more minutes for someone like Terrence Mann. If Nick Batum is out as well, you're getting likely 24 minutes or so for Brandon Boston at 3K flat on DraftKings. Zubac's minutes become a little bit more secure just because you have to allocate the other rotation players to covering Paul George minutes as opposed to going small. So it kind of just makes the whole team look better. I think Jackson at 5,900 is the one that ends up standing out the most. And then if Batum sits as well, Brandon Boston with guard and forward eligibility ends up looking like a really useful value.
And the final piece of injury news from this slate that we have to cover right now, DeAndre Ayton is questionable once again. He sat out last game. That led to a big game for JaVale McGee. Now, the reason JaVale McGee was so much more successful in this start compared to starts earlier in the season, Frank Kaminsky's out for the Suns also. So there is no situation where McGee is splitting minutes with Kaminsky. There's more of a secure role for JaVale McGee. I think everybody's aware that he would be a really good value play if Ayton doesn't play. But I want to ask you, since this game starts so much later than all of the other games, from a strategy standpoint, how are you going to construct your rosters to potentially make it so you would be able to get to JaVale McGee? Are you going to prioritize being able to late swap onto him?
Yeah, so I think it's a really difficult situation in part because there's so much value in the early games on this slate. JaVale McGee certainly has tournament winning potential without a doubt. He's one of the best per minute fantasy producers in the league. Like you said, there's no Frank Kaminsky, so the minutes are more secure. He played 26 minutes last game. It's likely you get something like that here as well. And that, gives him the potential to be one of the absolute best plays on the slate. The issue is that it's not I'd be more willing to just roll the dice and hope that Ayton sits if it didn't mean, passing up the Xavier Tillman, Marvin Bagley, potentially Alex Len, like all of those guys that you can take from earlier games. And that's, just a few off the top of my head. You have Chris Boucher as well. There's a lot of value early. So it's kind of like if you get stuck with JaVale McGee on this particular slate and DeAndre Ayton is in, you're in a really tough spot. The other way to think about it though is he is only $4,000 on DraftKings. If you project JaVale McGee simply to be DeAndre Ayton's backup and play like 15 or 16 minutes, he still projects for 5 times his salary, which isn't what you're looking for, but it's not the end of the world. So it really, and I haven't decided exactly how I'm going to approach it, but it really just comes down to the risk reward of if Ayton happens to sit, you have probably a low owned best value play on the slate in JaVale McGee. If Ayton plays, you just sacrificed a center spot for someone likely to play 16 minutes. And with Ayton, it's also not an injury. It was a non-COVID illness, which that, at least as of right now, is probably going to be the tiebreaker for me. That it's not a case where he's playing through a knee injury or something like that. It's just a matter of like, hey man, how do you feel? And it's been a few days. So if we don't get any news between now and then, I think I'm going to lean toward Ayton playing, but I do think that it's a very interesting like thought process.
Yeah, and big slate, lots of injury news. Once again, guys, do us a favor, like the video, subscribe to the YouTube channel. If you have any questions about any of the injuries today or anything else pops up, leave it in the comment section. I'm going to be back later to check some of those out. Until then, that'll do it for us. Thank you to Yahoo for sponsoring the show, and thanks for Dr. Adam for breaking down all the injuries today.